Alrighty, we're back. This is it. Back from hiatus. Welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. Like I just mentioned, we are back from our little, I guess, 2 week, 1.5 week vacation. A lot has happened. Both on, I guess, in sports world and otherwise, especially for us Texans. First off, John, how you doing? I know, and how have things been since the great freeze of Texas?
Things have been good. It was kind of crazy that we went from like 7 degrees to like 70 the next week. Um, I mean, things are starting to cool down a little bit again. We're in like the 50 degrees. So everything was a little chaotic during that time. But at least for me, I lived in New York when I was a kid, so the only real difference there was the fact that the state itself was not prepared, which led to a lot of the issues that arose. But we at my house were, and also it doesn't hurt that we live near a retirement home, so we actually never had our power get cut off because we were on their power grid.
Well, must be nice. Yeah, we went about 2 day. Well, we had a 2 day stretch where we were without power, but yeah, for the most part, we're fine. Me and my girlfriend and our animals, and yeah, I think everyone I know has been fine from that, so that's good. But yeah, in regards to sports world, especially football, a bunch of stuff has happened. We'll kind of dive right into it. I think right around that time, this had occurred, but the Carson Wentz finally dealt. It was for, I believe it was a second and a third. Second is conditional, and right, and then I think if he plays
Hmm.
like over 70% of the snaps, it becomes a first round pick. And that's for next year, obviously, since you have to wait and see for the conditional. That's what Indy sent to Philadelphia. But yeah, I mean, obviously, this is kind of a move that we both kind of expected to happen. Obviously, I want to get your reaction first. I guess thoughts on the trade. Any do you think it was one sided, or you feel like it was pretty fair?
Um, to be honest, it kind of felt like Philly maybe could have got a little more. I'm just speculating there because I imagine that they took the best offer available. So I don't fully know the market, especially after this season where Carson Wentz just didn't look very good. Um, but I don't know. I felt like that one season where he had the MVP level play that would have potentially made his value a little higher than what it was. But I think just the injury concerns on top of once again poor play this season, I understand why the price was where it was. I think it was a good job by the Eagles to make sure they got that conditional pick because it's either if the Colts make the playoffs or he plays 70% of the snaps. So technically he could get injured, not play at all, and as long as the Colts have a really good season, they'd be fine and the Eagles would, get that first round pick. So I think it was a good deal for both sides. I mean, like I had been saying throughout the season, or we'd both been saying, it needed to happen. There was just going to be a lot of drama in Philly if it didn't, because Jalen Hurts on a rookie deal, he's going to be there for a while. The fans in Philadelphia are not the most forgiving fans. So the moment that Wentz would make a bad play, all of a sudden Hurts, his name would be chanted throughout a stadium whenever fans can get back in there. So. Uh, that on top of the fact that Hertz he showed a lot of promise. The move made sense for both sides. Now the question remains though is can Carson Wentz return to his previous form? I don't think he necessarily has any more excuses because we can't say that he's on a bad team. I mean he went to he's on a team now that just went to the playoffs. I think that they are probably going to get better this offseason with some of the additions, some of the guys being another year in the system. Jonathan Taylor, namely, I think a lot of people are expecting him to have a really big year. Um, so yeah, I think this is a really big prove it year for Carson Wentz. But I will say, with all the talent that I think he has, the ability that he has shown, along with Frank Reich, who I think is truly one of the better offensive minds in this league, and I think is pretty underrated when it comes to the offensive greats that are currently coaching. I think that yeah he can work with Wentz, and I think that's made clear in the fact that they went out and they got their guy who Reich feels confident in. Um, Also, Carson, he's still a young quarterback, so if he returns to that level, I think a lot of people are going to look back on this trade as an absolute bargain for the Colts.
Yeah, so I would agree with pretty much everything you said. I mean, except for the fact that I really don't think that there are any better deals. I mean, obviously, yeah, we both assumed they took the best deal, but I mean, I think the stuff that we had mentioned previously, the fact that everyone knew Philly was going to have to eat that contract, some of that dead cap, and the fact that once again, like we mentioned, kind of like last episode, we went a lot over leverage. Philly really didn't have much leverage, like you mentioned. They already had Jalen Hurts right behind them, so teams knew that they weren't going to pay Carson Wentz to be a backup, or and also the thing you mentioned with even if they did go with Wentz as a starter, he was gonna get he was probably gonna get pulled at some point the moment he made a mistake, no matter how well he played, unless he played absolutely perfect. But no one can do that in the NFL. We've seen that. Um, but yeah, I think it's just a great trade, especially for really for both sides, but I think mainly for Indy. You don't lose a first round draft pick this year, or really a second round. You still have your draft picks this year. I know the left tackle. I'm blanking on his name, but he retired.
Ensemble.
Yes, but still, I mean, there's still some actually pretty good left tackles. I think that Trent Williams, guys like
Yep.
him are on the and we already saw Indy apparently made. They have cap space. They try to make a move for J.J. Watt, which we'll talk about later. So they have money, so they can easily fix. I mean, the rest of the line's good too. It's not like I don't think the line's gonna fall apart if they don't address that left tackle position. But I still think they will pretty early in the draft. And just based on their track record, they've done pretty well drafting O linemen. But regardless, like you mentioned too, the Frank Reich system, it's going to be, it's just he's very familiar with it, and arguably this O line is as good as that O line, and all the weapons he had the year they made that run to the Super Bowl. Only that they're younger, especially in the O line, because as we're seeing now, and I'm going over to Philly. Um, yeah, Philly it seems like in a transition. I mean, we already saw him. They already cut. I mean, Deshaun Jackson really didn't do much, but Alshon Jeffrey, and I wouldn't be surprised that they're probably going to let Jason Peters walk because he wasn't even like they didn't sign him until like right after Brandon Brooks got injured, like in not
Hmm.
preseason, but right before the season. And regardless, I mean that O line's getting up there. I mean Jason Kelsey's in his 30s. He's the only one that's really hasn't had many injuries. But I mean Lane Johnson's had a lot of ankle surgeries. Obviously Brandon Brooks coming back off an Achilles. And then like I mentioned, Jason Peters just old as heck but still playing. So yeah, I think this is just the beginning of a lot of turnover for Philly. But we'll see what happens. I mean, also guys like Fletcher Cox, their D line, Brandon Graham. I'm not saying they're going to do a fire sale, but especially it's a team to look out for, especially if things don't go their way, which I don't anticipate that they will. Just looking at the roster right now, will go their way. So I won't be surprised if even if they do keep those guys, some of those guys going into week one, going forward. Would not be surprised if week 8 we see, or even going, you're going to hear rumors, this guy from Philly's on the block, Fletcher Cox, or Cox, Brandon Graham, some of these guys, or if they don't already, well, I don't think Fletcher Cox will be cut, but some of those other guys I mentioned, maybe they'll get, released or things like that beforehand. So we'll see what happens there for Philly. But yeah, I mean, regardless though, I think it's a good trade. I really can't say, you know, it's one sided or anything. I just feel like personally, maybe a little more favorable for the Colts, but like we mentioned, Eagles are in a tough spot to begin with. Was there anything else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Um, and I think getting that first next year is important because, like you said, this year there could be a lot of moving pieces, and so if you got a first now, you might not necessarily be able to address a hole that is going to be bigger in the next off season. So I know sometimes you feel like you have to get the first that you can use immediately because that feels like the most valuable. But even in the state of the NFC East, I don't think the division is going to be as bad as it was last year. I think depending on who Washington gets as the quarterback, they could be really solid this year. I mean, that defense, we know how good they are. They're only going to get better. Obviously, Dallas, I think with a fully healthy Cowboys team, I think they're going to look better. And even the Giants, I mean, I don't think that they're necessarily, primed to be, competing for a Super Bowl run or really shouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't say shouldn't be competing for, the division title unless they were to make some pretty big changes. Even them though, it feels like based on what they had last year, there is still room for improvement because they do have a pretty young team. Saquon Barkley coming back, a solid defense, potentially getting even better with Joe Judge, in year two. To where Philly, once again, a lot of guys who are getting older. I think they cut Alshon Jeffrey. Wentz is gone. Just a lot of transition, and so you can use this year to kind of gauge where your young guys are at, and then use that pick in the next draft hopefully, for the Eagles, it's a first. For me, I'm hoping that somehow Wentz plays 69% of the snaps, or the Colts miss the playoffs, so that it's just a second. But regardless, I think the fact that it wasn't, next year does benefit them in a way, because they can kind of see where, the market's at for some of those guys like Fletcher Cox, because maybe they want to find his replacement in the next year if they do trade him or he retires or something along those lines.
Yeah. So and then yeah, they're gonna have to do a lot of that in Philly, but I think also for Indy too. Um, because they are gonna have. I'm not sure how much money they'll spend, but next year the cap increases too. Yeah, they'll lose a draft pick, but they'll basically get a little more money after.
Yep.
And you after another year, okay, do we address the quarterback position? Uh, you know, or and something else. If Wentz doesn't work out, maybe you sign a free agent quarterback or do something. But hard to see into that crystal ball now. But yeah, I do agree with you on that. That's a very good point. But anything else you wanted to mention?
And just on the flip side, I mean, for Indy, I think the fact that they got to keep their first is valuable too, because
Yeah,
they get to just use that pick
yeah.
to, maybe
Corner,
draft a
left
left tackle
tackle.
or
I,
corner. Yeah,
I think
something along
I
those
think those are
lines.
the main. Those are my main two. If I was Indy, what I would be looking at right now. I mean, you already have a good D line, good linebackers. You just need a playmaker in the secondary, really. Or if you just want to get that left tackle, get that. Don't have to worry about that. Then you can do that. But we'll have to see where they go, and we'll do a mock draft of them going forward. But obviously, we'll have to see where all the pieces fall for agency. Who knows?